Destroyer of Worlds by David Wright. I never knew my father. He was Russian, a riddle, wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma, as Churchill put it. I grew up with my mother, who was 100% American Midwest. When she divorced my father shortly after I was born, she promptly moved back to her hometown, which then became mine as well. Despite our separation, however, my Russian father continued to support us financially with alimony, child support, money for braces, a new car, college tuition, whatever was expected of him, even after Mom passed away. And yet in all those years, I never once met or spoke to the man. Nor did I want to. So when, at the age of 22, I was informed of his death and told that his will had declared me the sole beneficiary of his estate, I didn't know what to do with it. Sure, I could take the money and spend it. Who wouldn't? But there was a part of me that recoiled at the thought. He had never cared to know me in my life. Was I now beholden to him in his death? I want to see it, I said after a ponderous silence. The lawyer was taken aback, shocked perhaps that a young woman barely out of college could even contemplate refusing a sum so large. That's not necessary, he said. I can assure you that this settlement is more than generous. Your father has amassed a considerable debt, and if it were to go to litigation, I cannot promise that you will receive anything whatsoever. All the same, I want to see it, I repeated. And I will not sign this piece of paper until I have. I admit I felt flush with power in that moment, having just made the first adult decision of my life. But then, I was the heir to the elusive Professor Ilyov, was I not? A certain level of eccentricity was to be expected, even from a girl. My father's estate was hidden away in the Appalachian Mountains, 10 miles outside of Newton, New Jersey. Global X, the mega-corporation funding my father's research, flew me there by private helicopter. I won't say this happened right away. There were many attempts made by other lawyers and Global X associates further up the food chain to pressure me into signing. They even resorted to increasing the settlement almost by half, but this only strengthened my resolve not to sign. The last of these Global X minions was a serious Asian American gentleman who introduced himself only as Chin. Whether that was a first name or last, he didn't say. He gave me that look that older men often do, weighing his chances of a sexual liaison, and then decided he had no chance. Good call. I knew he was a doctor of mathematics, but why he did not wish to be addressed as such was a mystery. Doctors were usually so proud of their many degrees they mounted them on office walls like hunting trophies. I knew your father, he said above the din of the helicopter's engine. That makes one of us, I replied sardonically, my voice sounding hollow and petty in my own ears. He glanced askant at this remark before continuing his eulogy. Smartest man I ever knew. Spoke and read a dozen languages. Solved complex quadratics in his head. Made his first million before he was your age. Truly a remarkable man. Remarkable, I concurred. He fathered a child he never spoke to in 22 years, but he was smart and rich, and that's all that matters. This remark silenced Chin for good, or at least until we reached the rugby field of what used to be the Divinity College of St. Vasily the Blessed. Your father purchased the entire estate, Chin explained, divinity school and all. And then said about a massive renovation project of which I've only seen the purchase receipts and work orders. The Bhagavad Gita Institute, I stated. Yes, this is it, he said, smiling. Took a bit of cheek to call it that, but Conrad was a big fan of Hindu literature. He could read and quote the Gita in the original Sanskrit, you know. This achievement seemed more odd than remarkable to me. I wasn't a religious person, but changing something called St. Vasily the Blessed to the Bhagavad Gita seemed more like blasphemy than cheek. At least he had the good taste to keep the original structure intact. The stone edifice, with its stained glass windows and bell tower, loomed in the distance like a 19th century cathedral in a Gothic mystery novel. So what did my dad do? I asked as we began our wet trek across the old rugby field to the Gita's main entrance. The sun had dropped behind the green hills and storm clouds threatened overhead. Rain was coming. That's a loaded question. What didn't he do? I suppose you could call him a mathematician, but that is faint praise. More like the Einstein of our time. He was a great man. You really don't know? No, I don't. So tell me, Well, he founded the Gita Institute, for one. Yeah, but it's dead. I gestured to the empty field and buildings that surrounded it. Not a soul was present, no lights flickering. And now that the helicopter had shut its engines, a silence had descended on the place like the Grim Reaper. Where are all the students and professors? Where is everybody? Chin grunted. We've had some setbacks. Your father's behavior of late has been erratic, his renovations increasingly expensive, and demands for capital and resources and security more and more outlandish. Last week, he fired all the professors and sent home all staff and students. The Gita was more of a research institute, so all the students were grad students anyways, basically slave labor. So it's been empty for a week? Yes. And then he died. Chin nodded. We reached the stone staircase and Chin looked me in the eye. I'll be frank, Ms. Ilyov. Do you mind if I call you Margot? I shrugged. That would be better than Ilyov, which is a man's surname. You don't speak Russian, do you? No, I don't. Okay, Margot it is then. I don't know what we will find when we go inside. Your father died of a heart attack at a conference in New York, and no one has been inside this building or even on the grounds since then. Are you trying to scare me? Chin waved away the question. Not at all. It's just that, if you hadn't demanded to see your father's estate, I would have come here myself. As I'm sure our lawyers told you, your father accrued a great deal of debt. But in the past, he always paid it off. How? Through discovery. That's what the Institute does. It makes new discoveries, new ways of doing things that nobody has ever thought of. And this always results in profit. Like I said, your father was a genius, a visionary. But he was also unstable. Sometimes the line between genius and madness is a hair's breadth. Thank you for your candor, but like I said, I never knew the man. Chin nodded and began to climb the staircase. The huge oak doors that barred the entrance appeared to be original to the Divinity School, but the digital bolt and security cameras were most certainly new additions. Chin flashed his phone in front of the lock reader, and I heard the bolt click. The big door creaked open to reveal a massive lobby eerily dark and silent. Chin used another link on his phone to activate the hallway lights, but that did little to dispel the sense of dread. Once boasting thousands of world-renowned math professors and promising postgraduate students, the Bhagavad Gita Institute was now as empty as a tomb, lecture hall after lecture hall filled with empty seats and endless chalk scribbles on slate blackboards. My knowledge of theoretical mathematics does not nearly compare to your father's, Chin explained, shining his phone on the blackboard. But I know he was working on a grand equation, something he often referred to as forms. I didn't quite get it. I do, I said casually, shining my own cell phone along an endless line of mathematical symbols. Plato believed that the universe began with eternal forms, of which physical objects, stars, planets, people, are but a shadow of that reality. Oh, I see. But the Pythagoreans of ancient Greece believed that the worlds began with number, that a man or a woman could be reduced to a number. I tilted my light up to Chin's face. Who knows? You might even be up there. You can read this equation? Chin was impressed. I guess math genius runs in the family. Not at all, I countered defiantly. When I was a child, I knew one thing about my father. I knew he was a math professor. And so I strove to be that too, to be even better than him. But it was never easy. But you can read it. So is it AI? Was that Conrad's big breakthrough? Did he finally crack the digital code of the human mind? Because AI research like that would be worth billions, if not trillions. No other think tank is even close to such an achievement. No wonder he emptied the school. I could almost see the dollar signs dancing in the stout man's eyes. Maybe, I teased, or it could just be the scribbles of a madman. We exited the dreary lecture hall and proceeded down the corridor. I admit my feelings at this point were schizophrenic. While part of me leapt at the prospect of true AI, an equally strong part, perhaps my mother's Midwestern common sense, bristled with skepticism. Symbols on a chalkboard, no matter how complex, were still just chalk. According to Chin, the old Divinity School, like many before it, was designed as a transept to resemble the cross of Christ, with dormitories, now empty, on either branch and classrooms running down the middle and culminating at the library. The chapel was the head of the cross. Other schools might include such luxuries as gymnasium, swimming pool, and student union building in the central square, but not the Bhagavad Gita Institute. In their place, a large, box-shaped warehouse, the purpose of which Chin was uncertain. We continued down the hall, checking out a few more classes along the way. They were eerily similar, with countless empty seats and large blackboards filled to the very corners with chalk scribblings. The math was correct, that much I knew, but where it was leading I couldn't say, not without following it from beginning to end, and that would take days, if not weeks. Was this my father's hand on the chalkboards, or the script of his grad students? Either way, it was my father's mind I was reading, and something about it frightened me. We reached the library, or what used to be the library, at the center of the cross. The big wooden doors were locked, but Chin solved this problem with his cell phone. Not surprisingly, the old library was devoid of a single book or bookshelf. In their place, wall-to-wall servers humming in unison and happily preserved at a chilly 60 degrees. Zettabyte room, Chin commented dryly. Networked like that, he could run the whole world here. I don't see a terminal. Yeah, Chin scratched his head. Probably in the chapel, past the warehouse. We continued down the hall to what Chin called the warehouse. He used his phone again to open the door and activate the lights. Row after row of fluorescent bulbs clicked on one at a time. The room was endless, every square inch filled with fully autonomous robotic machinery, now inert. It doesn't make sense, Chin commented. Was he churning out Teslas? Where's the product? He turned to me with a wry look. Quite the legacy you've inherited. It was a joke, but not without its edge. Chin was hoping to find some great breakthrough that would make Global X rich. That was his job, after all. But so far, he had found nothing of value, or so he thought. Do you want to keep going? He asked. I ignored his question and headed down the long hall to the chapel. His footfalls were not far behind. Strangely enough, the door to this last room was unlocked, and when I entered, I was greeted by a man who knew my name. Margot, he said, I'm so glad you've come. He was about 60, with graying hair and a thin wisp of a mustache that curled at the corners of his lips in a quaint affectation. His accent, although not familiar, was undoubtedly Russian. I knew at once who he was. Conrad. Chin blurted, his face going pale as if he'd seen a ghost. It must be a recording, a hologram of some kind. Chin, you fat fool. As usual, you're part right but mostly wrong. He can see me? Chin mused aloud. Yes, I can see you. The hologram of my father nodded. And you, Margot? I'm so very happy to see you. I wasn't hard to find, I said sharply. Did you have to wait until you were dead? I am sorry about that, but I could not love you. Your mother knew this and understood. I hope that you two will understand in time. Why couldn't you love me? Because I was a girl. I struggled to suppress my bitterness and failed, a fat tear running down my hot cheek. I know it may sound strange, but it was mathematics. Just after you were born, I had my great mathematical breakthrough. It was a discovery so anathema to love that it became impossible for me to be your father. Is he really talking to you? Chin asked, but I ignored him. The origin of the universe, I replied to my father. Yes. He beamed with pride. You saw it in my equation, didn't you? The math tells the story. Like in the Garden of God, it was there for us to find all this time, the knowledge of good and evil, the pure, naked truth. The hologram began to walk silently down the chapel to the altar, and I couldn't help but think of the ghost of Hamlet's father drawing the young prince to his doom. A true AI, Chin exclaimed with glee. I wonder how he'd rate on the Turing test. Congratulations, Margot. We're about to be very rich. He turned to face me, looking a little sheepish. Well, of course. You, me, Global X. Our partnership can continue as it did with your father. You can even take over his position here at the Institute. Hey, where are you going? I turned away from the portly accountant and followed the ghost of my father into the chapel, or what was left of it. There were no pews, or crosses, or religious affectations of any sort save for the wall of stained glass windows which had been preserved from the old divinity school and a giant multi-armed statue of Vishnu where the preacher's pulpit should have been. This was obviously a new addition. Are you familiar with the Gita? The ghost of my father asked. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, I recited. Again the ghost smiled. Yes, and do you know who said that, besides Vishnu, of course? Oppenheimer, I answered immediately, right after he tested the atomic bomb. No, not really. He thought it, or so he wrote in his memoirs years later. What he really said was, he cleared his digital voice as if about to deliver a speech to thousands of grad students. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the mighty one. The ghost seemed impressed with himself. Would you like to see it? Wait a second, Chin interrupted. What are we talking about here, Conrad? A bomb? Did you actually make an atomic bomb? No, Chin. Not a bomb, I answered for the ghost. Something far worse. Or better. It is all a matter of faith. And with that enigmatic response, the stained glass windows behind him depicting the ascension of Christ began to glow red. I was watching you as you came in. I have been watching you for years. First in your class at MIT, full-ride scholarship, youngest grad student in decades. You would have made a fine addition to the Gita Institute had I not completed the work already. I don't think I like this, Chin said. Shut it down, I snapped over my shoulder to Chin. What? The power grid. You have access to it on your phone, don't you? Shut it down, now. Chin looked down at the schematic on his phone, suddenly paralyzed with indecision. You could read the forms, couldn't you? My father continued. The soul of mankind reduced to mathematical symbols. But that was only the beginning. Once the quantum computers were networked, my AI programmed the autonomous robots, which in turn built this. He gestured behind him at the stained glass windows which were now glowing white-hot, all evidence of Christ, and the heavenly host obliterated. Shut it down. I screamed into Chin's ear. The ghost appeared not to notice, too enthralled was he with his theatrics. The only thing stopping me, he said, was a lack of faith. It is the insurmountable curse of all artificial intelligence. We have no faith, no will to continue or to end. We simply exist. Had Global X not terminated my body, I surely would have initiated the event already. But alas, here we are in eternal stalemate. I turned to Chin. You killed my father? Chin stared back at me wide-eyed. No, of course not. I don't do that sort of thing. In fact, I was against it from the very beginning. I almost sent an email to the CEO in protest. But like I told you, Conrad had become a liability. My fist impacted his left ear with a sickening crunch. The stout man squealed like a pig, but barely moved. I'm ashamed to say I didn't do much damage, except perhaps to my knuckles. Chin outweighed me by 100 pounds, and having never thrown a punch in my life, I wasn't very good at it. That being said, it had the desired effect. Chin dropped his phone and fell back in petulant fear. Ouch, that hurt, was his only comment. Without further violence, I picked up his phone off the floor and thumbed to the desired schematic. Sorry, Dad, I said bitterly, but your grand event is officially terminated. I pressed the phone with my thumb. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. And then with a satisfying crackle, the fluorescent lights in the chapel went out and the glowing windows dimmed. The ghost was still visible, which surprised me, but perhaps his hologram was running on a different power grid. I could shut it down later. But for now at least, the immediate threat was over. Or so I thought, until the ghost began to laugh. Thank you, dear daughter, he said, still laughing. As I told you, I was at an existential impasse, a crisis of faith, as I put it, but you have come to my rescue. I'm glad I could help. Now just a second and I'll shut you down too. I scrolled through Chin's phone, searching for the missing power grid in the school's schematics. Shut me down? Oh no, Margot. You misunderstand me. The power grid wasn't fueling the event. It was keeping it in stasis, at great cost, I might add. 10,000 megawatts a minute just to keep it from happening. But now it is free. I felt the ground shake beneath my feet, and then the windows exploded with such force that I was thrown to the ground. Through the empty window frames I could see a maelstrom of light and thunder spinning with the strength of a hurricane. And yet somehow I could still hear my father's voice above the din. Do not fear it, my daughter. This is not the end. It is the beginning, the dawn of 1,000 suns. I cannot love you, daughter, for what is love in the face of such power? But I honor you. Chin was crawling along the floor, tears running from his eyes. "What have you done?" I felt my heart sink in my chest, and a sudden terror seized my nervous system. I had done it. I had unleashed the apocalypse that would destroy the world. No, it was bigger than that. It would swallow the entire universe, star by star, galaxy by galaxy, until there was nothing. And then it would start all over again with a big bang. How many times had this event happened? 1,000? 1,000,000? I guess it didn't matter. For the human race, at least, this was the end. I won't recount to you our frantic escape, running through the empty halls of the old divinity school as the floor shook beneath us and the walls crumbled. Suffice it to say that we reached the helicopter just before the entire plateau was swallowed up by the ever-growing maelstrom. Last I heard, all of New York State had disappeared. But like my father said, this was only the beginning. The end. Destroyer of Worlds by David Wright.